I got nothing but love for Jamie. I know he's salty. I know that this situation is dire, and I don't feel like it's fair. So I feel like it's, even if it makes me look bad, I come out of this and maybe bring this stuff to light again. It is what it is, try to do the right thing by him, but, it obviously was his doom.
Injustice Anywhere presents Snow Files, the wrongful conviction of Jamie Snow and how they got away with it. Snow Files, Episode 7, Drive-By Confession, Ed Palumbo and Shannon Schmidt-Wallace. The mission of the Snow Files podcast is to expose the misconduct of the state's attorney's office under Charles Renard. It is not our intention in any way to disparage the current state's attorney's office or the Bloomington Police Department.
One thing that I want people to really think about as we start going through these witnesses is this is the evidence that the state and the courts, specifically the state right now, this is the evidence. These are the witnesses that the state claims. DNA testing, forensic testing, fingerprint testing, all the forensic testing that we want to do. This is the evidence that, number one, got me spending the rest of my life in prison, and number two, has the state refusing to do any of the forensic testing. This is the evidence that they keep falling back on, these witnesses. So as we go through these people, keep that in mind. This is what they're using to deny me the forensic testing, because they say this just, it wouldn't make a difference against Ed Palumbo. It wouldn't make a difference against the rest of these people that are coming up. So I just want to highlight that. And I'll probably say it again, but I just think that's important for y'all to keep, to keep your mind open about it. It's just unbelievable. It's ridiculous.
Ed Palumbo was a jailhouse witness who testified against Jamie in 2001 at trial. Palumbo testified that within days of the Clark Station murder, Jamie confessed to him as they were passing each other on Olive Street in their cars driving in opposite directions. Palumbo further testified that within weeks they had another conversation at Funk's Grove. During that conversation, according to Palumbo, Jamie told him they talked about how the composite drawings did not look like Jamie. Palumbo also testified that Jamie told him the kid was being a smartass, and so Jamie shot him, and that Jamie told him it wasn't as hard as he thought it would be, and that Jamie did not get a lot of money from the crime. Palumbo was brought in for questioning about the bus station robbery on April 2, 1991. In the first police interview, Palumbo confessed to that crime, stating he was paid $730 but had stayed in the car. At this time, Palumbo was under tremendous pressure, but he said nothing about the supposed confession that Jamie made to him about the Clark murder. Palumbo was released that night and he ran. On April 16, 1991, when police were searching for Palumbo, they interviewed Palumbo's girlfriend, Shannon, who stated that she felt that Palumbo was at Rick Barkis's residence. There was no mention of the drive-by on Morris Avenue or a confession by Jamie Snow at that time. They only discussed Palumbo turning himself in later that evening. On April 17, 1991, Palumbo again spoke with police and didn't mention anything about Jamie confessing to a murder, even though he was desperately trying to get himself out of trouble. Palumbo's girlfriend, Shannon, spoke with police on April 23, 1991, and stated that Palumbo had told her on April 2nd that he passed Jamie in his car on Morris Avenue, and they stopped to talk. Jamie asked Palumbo if he had read about him in the paper, and said gun went off and the kid died. Shannon also stated that Ed told her that he told Rick Barkis over the phone about it. This is the first mention of any confession by Jamie, although both Shannon and Palumbo had been interviewed by police numerous times throughout that month. On May 9, 2001, an interview was conducted with Ed Palumbo, without his attorney, Mike Barford, present. From the police interview. After the meeting between Palumbo and Mr. Barford was completed, Sergeant Bernardi and I spoke again with Mr. Barford. He advised us that we may speak with his client about the conversation we had with the possible suspect. He also stated he wanted us to talk to his client about his involvement in the armed robbery that he was in custody for. We were also informed that he could speak with Palumbo about his knowledge of other crimes committed. Mr. Barford advised us that he would not be present in the room during the interview, but he would check back with us in about 20 minutes. He then left. It was during that interview on May 9th that Palumbo stated that Jamie Snow was responsible for 4 or 5 robberies that had occurred in the area, including the bus station robbery he had confessed to earlier. Palumbo also talked about being at Jamie's house several times, and one of those times Jamie had showed him the .38 and .25 caliber guns.
Ed Palumbo and I were not as close as people thought we were. The state tried to portray like we were friends. We were acquaintances. I knew him, but we weren't hanging out together. He was never at my house. He never came over to my house, was hanging out at the house. He was never around my family, my kids, none of that stuff. So what's really striking to me about his whole thing in this case was that, when the murder happened, he was at Detective Barkis's house having Easter dinner with him. And Rick got the call to report to the gas station because there'd been a homicide. And Ed, in one of his police reports, said that him and his girlfriend went to the crime scene and was, that night was there, looking on as they were doing whatever they were doing. And then, lo and behold, according to Ed, the very next day, he sees me and I confessed to him that I committed this crime. I mean, that's just so unbelievably ludicrous to me. How lucky for him and his buddy, the detective. I'm eating dinner at your house, and you're called to the scene of this homicide, and the very next day, the person who does it tells me. How coincidental is that?
It was also at that time that Palumbo stated for the first time that Jamie confessed to doing the Clark murder. Palumbo then stated that they pulled their cars alongside of each other and had a conversation. Jamie Snow had asked Palumbo if he could get him some pot. Palumbo states he told Snow no. He further states that Jamie then asked him, "Did you hear what I did?" Palumbo states he again said no to Snow. Snow then stated, "Did you hear about that kid at the Clark station?" Palumbo states he then said no to Jamie. Snow then stated, "Have gun, go off, kid dies."
I stopped him, and, he said that I had said to him, I don't remember exactly what he had said, but he said I said something about committing the crime, but, the truth was, I knew that he'd been out doing armed robberies with someone else. I knew he was out doing that kind of stuff, and I was just making a flippant remark to him about, I read about you in the newspaper, what happened, the kid wouldn't give you the money or what, and he looked at me crazy, and he drove off, and I never saw him again until he came into the courtroom to testify against me in 2000, at my trial. Never saw him again until I saw him in the courtroom.
Palumbo's bus station robbery confession was thrown out. However, that didn't stop police. Palumbo ended up getting 19 years for residential burglary. And at that time, police didn't take his hearsay knowledge stating Jamie committed all of these crimes seriously. It seems they had an axe to grind with Palumbo too, and used every bit of their authority to ensure he received an extended sentence for the residential burglary conviction. Recall the newly discovered 1993 memo from FOIA. The officer responding to Katz's request to indict Jamie pointed out that he put very little credence in the Palumbo lead, that Palumbo had a hidden agenda, that Shannon was only parroting Palumbo, and that it was totally hearsay. It wasn't until 1999 that new detectives Barks and Katz reached out to Palumbo once again. It was only then that Palumbo took the stand against Jamie. claiming one more time that Jamie confessed to him during that drive-by on the street. But he went on to add a few new details, stating, Shannon was actually in the car with him, and when they got home, he asked her if she had heard what Jamie said. In a few weeks after the drive-by incident, they met at Funk's Grove and had a disagreement with Jamie, telling him it wasn't so smart to have that conversation in the car in front of his girlfriend, Jamie's wife, and the other girl. And at this time, Jamie told him that he took care of the gun. That Jamie also told him at Funk's Grove that he didn't look like the composite in the newspaper. That Jamie said the kid was a smartass, so he shot him, and it wasn't as hard as he thought it would be, and he didn't get a lot of money. Additionally, Shannon backed Palumbo's story up when she testified, stating that she was in the car with Palumbo during the exchange, but testified that she just heard the word paper. However, in a newly discovered taped interview from 1999, shortly before trial, Shannon was directly asked whether she was in the car with Palumbo, and she states no. After all, they had to have someone to corroborate Palumbo's story.
He told me he came to an intersection on Morris Avenue and saw Jamie Snow. And Snow asked him if he saw his picture in the paper that morning. And then Ed said that Jamie said the gun went off and the kid died.
Now, when you said that morning, when was that?
It was the day after the shooting happened.
Okay, so the shooting happened March 31st, 1991. So the next day would have been
April 1st.
of 1991. Now, were you at that at the time this conversation took place?
No.
Where were you at?
I was probably at home.
In 2015, Palumbo stated in an affidavit, recanting his testimony. When I was brought in for questioning, Detective Barkus and his partner interviewed me. Detective Barkus became uncontrollably angry during the interview, so much that Detective Barkus's partner had to leave the room. I felt intimidated by Detective Barkus. I felt intimidated by other law enforcement officers too, because I felt Barkus may have been influencing matters. Once I was convicted and sent away, I felt less pressure. I don't believe that Jamie Snow was responsible for killing Bill Little. I never thought in my life that Jamie Snow would have had anything to do with killing anybody. I believed that when Jamie Snow went to trial, and he was going to be found not guilty. Palumbo further recanted in October of 2019 in an interview with Bob Ruff for the Truth and Justice podcast.
This was May 9th, 91, so about 5 weeks after. It was an 8-page statement. So this is what's weird. It says,
was I in jail then?
I think so. So it says your attorney, Mike Bradford,
Wow.
spoke with you. Basically, your attorney gave the police permission to interview you without him present.
Wow.
Is what the police reports say.
See, I don't remember any of that, but I remember the whole thing being shady because every time, even when I talked, I was under a lot of stress, but even when I talked to his attorney, I told the man, that I would testify for the defense because I did not believe that Jamie Snow had anything to do with that.
Well, I guess let me ask you this, because I'm trying to piece together from old reports and the affidavits that you wrote later. Did Jamie actually say that to you, that he killed Bill?
He didn't say that.
What did he say to you?
Basically, did I read about him, that whole situation.
Did you read about me in the paper?
Yep.
Last night. So, where are you guys at? Like when does this? So Olive and Morris and Olive Street. So,
I don't know, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you guys at an intersection? And you pull up next to each other?
Right before the intersection.
And so you guys are hollering across from car. Did you get out of the car?
No.
So you're just
right next to each other.
Parked cars. I mean, I've been over there. I mean, there's traffic there. There's cars moving there, right? So you guys couldn't have parked too long, right? Not then.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood him.
Well, that's what I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
I get it, but I And maybe I misunderstood him.
So, but that was what as best you remember it. I guess walk me through that as best you remember that incident. Understand? We both understand it's been 28 years, but you're driving. Do you remember where you were going or what was going on?
No.
Okay.
I was just driving, and I seen him, and I didn't even know that I asked. He asked me for some smoke. I don't even remember that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a nightmare. All these years later, really.
Well, I mean, this is 20 years later, and you're still sitting here talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then who would believe that they would give him all life in prison?
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Who would have believed that this hearsay, even telling his attorney, I mean, where's all that stuff at? That's when I was saying, hey, and then when I said I didn't know, certain people, that should have let them know that I was, contemplating, I was on Jamie's side.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer it went on, the more it was like, ooh, I can't turn this around. And I wasn't so smart as manipulating the system like I thought, now, I got, all this time for a burglary, and are they just putting me away for a later date, And I started getting like, what, man, why did I get all this time for a burglary,
Right.
And then why are they all of a sudden taking him to court right before I get out, Because when they came to me, I said, hey, shit, I'm out of here. I'm sick of this shit. I'm going to jail. I'm going to SEG. And then, when we got to Logan, they just, we know, you want to, go to SEG till you get out. You don't have to get out, you can do the rest of your time, more than, the time you done. At that point, I didn't think I was going to be able to make it home. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it home.
Mm-hmm.
Per, people that were hating on me.
In the prison?
Yeah. See, I had the power of good and evil, you might say. I had people that loved me that were saying, man, we don't want to get involved in this bullshit, but you got, it's kind of like, stop sign, go,
right.
You could go, no, how personally invested are you,
How did you get from what you actually remember, which was you guys pulling up, him saying, did you read about me in the paper? And the other person that was there that time was Tammy, said she did remember that. She told me that she remembered the conversation, but she remembered it the other way around, that Jamie was asking you if you read about you in the paper because the bus station robbery was the night before. But whatever that conversation was, one way or the other, I'm not here to figure out, who heard it right, who's telling the truth.
It don't matter.
It went from that to years later, you're testifying at trial that he said he shot the kid, confessed. It went from Shannon wasn't with you to Shannon was, and Shannon's story changed over the years that she was at home and you told her about it, to then she was there. There's a lot going on, a lot of stuff. And I told you when we sat down that looking at the record, you look like an asshole.
Hello.
But I feel like there's more. And to be clear too, I mean, afterwards you came through and you've written 2 affidavits to try to help Jamie afterwards.
Yes.
Doing the right thing. So but what I want to know, and it's not for,
because these cops, they definitely didn't do Jamie right. They didn't do Jamie right at all. They were shady because they didn't tell the truth when they said that I never believed that he did that, from the beginning, even his own attorney. Why didn't his attorney point that out? Why did we all go to court right before I got out of jail? I mean, why was that so significant? It just don't make no sense.
And that's what I'm getting at. I think that was probably strategic.
Right.
But I want to know what happened with you to go from you telling them, I don't think there's any chance Jamie did it, to testifying that you believed he did do it in court. What happened during that time? Whether it's just your own conscious interactions with police, interactions with prosecutors, whatever the case may be, what got you into that position to where you were willing to stand up in court and testify to that?
Man, I don't know. It was a battle.
What do you mean by that?
It was a battle whether I should just totally. I definitely did not want to have anything to do with that shit no more. I thought, like I said, I never, ever, ever thought that anything I said would be significant enough to matter.
Why didn't you think it would be significant?
Because I never believed that Jamie did that. And I made that perfectly clear to every single person. And why wasn't that significant? Because they manipulated, everything around, not to make myself sound like an angel, but, I'm no angel, but damn, I was just young and dumb and in love, and I really honestly thought that this would be like swept under the rug.
Did any of the authorities ever tell you that other people had already said Jamie confessed?
Yep, they did.
Who told you that?
After I went to jail, or because I had a big problem with Julie was getting breaking up with Marcus, and she wanted to go, visit me while I was in jail. Mm-hmm. There was a big problem because she worked there.
Right.
I don't know if you know about that. But anyway,
Once you got arrested for the bus station robbery,
they pretty much distanced him from me then. Mm-hmm. Because I guess he was in, charge of that case where the kid.
With Bill Little's case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So after I went to jail and prison, he never was around.
So you didn't have any more contact with him after that?
They made sure of that.
Even in 99 when they come back and interview you and you get ready for trial, nothing with Marcus?
I don't remember ever seeing him.
Who'd you deal with? Was it Katz?
Probably one of them. Mm-hmm. But boy, they lie. They know it.
How you lied to you?
Yeah.
What do they do to lie to you?
I told them, I says, Jamie didn't do this shit. They didn't care. Mm-hmm. I told them that I would testify to that, and they didn't care.
Are they the ones that told you that other people had already?
Yeah. Yeah. They said, man, you're this ain't, nothing. I told them that, and then quit calling me. Right. I don't want to be written back here. I don't want to go to the grand jury and none of that shit. I don't want to be involved in this. I'm in prison. And do you think I want to be, taken out knowing that I'm going to go to court to testify against this Jamie kid? That don't even make no damn sense.
But you did go testify for, and that's what I'm curious is, why did you, were they offering
and
you
I was ready to go out. I was either do that, they done brought me from the work camp where I was at and put me in SEG and told me I was going to Statesville or whatever, Joliet again. And then I ended up going to Logan, and they took all my property, held my property to the day I walked out. Didn't have no property the whole time I was there. They kept my TV and everything.
Was that standard procedure, or were they doing that to push you into testifying?
They weren't giving me they weren't going to give me nothing unless I went to court, or they kept that shit to the day I walked out of jail. They would not give it to me. They weren't happy about that shit.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is the pressure? I know, I'll tell you, I've heard from other people that one of their tactics was, well, listen, he's already getting convicted anyway. Because everybody else is already doing this.
Right.
And they were did they ever offer you any kind of leniency?
No.
They didn't offer you anything for it.
But they always, act like maybe, when I did it, I was already in jail and stuff, basically. I just did it for like a visit. Can I see my girlfriend? And, that's all they did for me.
let you visit.
Yeah.
Is that Shannon?
Yeah.
So when they bring you back, they would let you see her.
Yeah. That's it. They knew they had that. Marcus led him right into that. He knew that I didn't want to be, I was young and in love, He knew that I was willing to make a deal with the devil in order to stay home, but he already was too smart that he let me out that last time and I took off.
That makes more sense. You've said to me several times a day that I was young and in love, but it didn't make sense till you just explained that. So they were
playing on that.
So I guess, and I know I keep coming back to it, but you got to understand the obvious question is when you tell me that you're telling them, if I testify, I'll testify for Jamie. But then when you get on the stand, you didn't, and I can't.
Well, I mean, as time went by, I told them basically, man, every one of them knew, even way before I even went to court, they all knew that by then they must have gathered all kinds of information. I never really knew what the hell they had on him.
They didn't have nothing but a bunch of yous,
right?
A bunch of guys just like you,
right? And that always baffled me. I was like, what the hell? I figured we would be drinking, laughing about this years later. Maybe punch me in the eye or something. I mean, and then, but man, who in my wildest dreams, I didn't even realize it. Honest to God, I was like, and I didn't think I said anything that spurred it on, But Jamie, I mean, honest to God, I thought everything was going to be hearsay, But then, I went to court. I figured when someone's fucking with my time, and I couldn't get at them, and it's all a bunch of bullshit.
Who was fucking with your time?
I'm just saying that, when you fuck with my time, I'm going to, fuck with you. Well, my time, I'm getting ready to get out of fucking prison after damn near 9 years of prison, and people wanted to push it to the limit,
What do you mean by that?
Try to make it where my time got fucked up.
Like adding more to it, or putting you in seg and
adding more to it, pushing me to do something that I might go to prison for the rest of my life for.
So, I guess maybe the question I had was backward before when I asked if they offered you a deal. They didn't, but were they threatening you with more time if you didn't?
Yes. Yeah, they told me that they were going to bring me to court and I could be charged with perjury or what else?
Obstruction of justice.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Not just that. It's different. Whatever adds up to 5 more years.
Yeah, it probably said they can throw an aggravated on the front of anything.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I already know.
Aggravated obstruction of justice, aggravated perjury.
Yeah, all that, and then I was thinking 5 years. I had myself convinced, that I was not going to get out of prison, that I might have to, defend myself, in the wrong circumstances. And I mean, I don't know. I was under a delusion that I might not get out of prison for some reason.
So here you sit, let me know if this is again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is this a fair assessment of the situation that you're months away from getting out? They bring you in.
Weeks. Right. A month, really close.
And they're telling you,
yes,
if you don't go testify against Jamie, we're going to hit you with obstruction of justice, perjury.
If I don't go to court, yeah.
So is that the answer?
The catalyst for me even going, and I still went to SEG. They locked me in SEG and shipped me. And then they said,
they locked you in SEG before
they didn't
the trial?
say shit. They packed all my shit. And they said, you're going to court. And I said, all my property and shit. And they said, and they told me I was going to Joliet or Statesville or whatever the hell it was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up going to Logan or Lincoln. I can't remember which one it was, where I had talked to some people about my situation.
Right.
And
And they never gave you your property back?
And then, they didn't give me my property or nothing. Nothing. So, and I was stuck in the dome, and I was in the cushy spot. I was in work camp, man.
So were you out in the camp at the other prison?
I was living the dream, man. Mowing every day, bush hogging, loving prison, ready to get out.
Right.
Next thing you know I'm not, going to court or nothing. And they said, yes, you are. We're going. And then with that little threat, they threw me in SEG, and I was on my way.
So you were put in SEG
Yeah.
Before the trial?
Yes.
How long were you in SEG before the trial? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but.
I mean, we're talking days, weeks, months?
Oh, shit. Weeks, within, thinking I was going to SEG.
Right.
And all because of this. Like I want to, be involved in that. I didn't want nothing to be, but I was mad.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I'm telling, can I win this, turn this around? No.
So I get
and that's where the story keeps going over and over and over, kind of like the way they wanted to go, making me the piece of shit the whole time when I really, wasn't that much of a piece of shit, because in the beginning I thought, hey, I'm going to turn this around and, the joke's going to be on them,
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, somehow, in that confusion, I actually started believing that I might just turn this around. But then it turned out, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, and then they, turned it around on me. Oh, yeah,
Well, now you're in SEG. We're taking your shit.
Yeah.
We're going to give you more time if you don't do
5 more years, for every charge, I don't know, man. All I know is I've done all that time. And then I was just like, oh, my God, now I'm getting out of prison. I'm going to court on this joker, this is crazy, man. This ain't me at all. I want as far as I can get away from that.
So is that a fair assessment that I get the motivation why, and then did you feel that it wasn't going to hurt anything anyway? Right.
Especially with 3 other people disputing it, saying, okay, he said this shit, but everybody that knows Jamie knows that he's not that kind of guy, which would, even at the worst scenario, he's just a bragger, and he ain't the person that did that, because he ain't that guy. He wouldn't even be acting like that if he did something like that. And you look at someone that has, done something like that, like, if you've been in prison, with someone, they look just like anybody, but they get that edge on them, they get that way about them. Hey, Jamie, don't have that.
Have you been around murderers in your life?
I've been in prison 3 times.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I've been in prison 3 times.
Well, like I said, and the reason I say that is because a lot of people listening, when you're saying that edge, if you've never been around somebody that
would hurt you for real.
But you know what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. And that ain't Jamie. That ain't Jamie. Jamie's just a pot smoking, slick talking, woman loving, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the way Jamie is. Jamie's a ladies' man. Used to be,
Right. So did you feel like, fine, I'll go in there, tell the story the state wants me to tell so they don't fuck with me, and nothing's going to happen to Jamie?
Yeah. And I really believe that anything at all, even that was said about Jamie, would just be hearsay, because who am I? I'm already in jail,
Right.
I'm going to make a deal with the devil to why would that be, and I'm not saying, I was with them, eyewitness. So why would this be so relevant? But I believe that it was relevant because, certain people, they wanted to close the case and by any means possible. And I think that, the record shows that they don't do very well. And if you don't believe in a blue line, then you really are a fool.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is to make a conviction by any means possible.
Right.
An attaboy or not an attaboy. It's either good or no good. So they provide a service, which is take care of business, just like we provide a service, take care of business. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it is what it is. It's a war. You know, they win a lot. And if you underestimate the law, then you're a fool.
Do you regret testifying against Jamie?
Yes.
I've got the documents, but I'll let you explain. What did you do afterwards to try to help him?
Anything I could.
I know there's two affidavits.
I got nothing but love for Jamie. I know he's salty. I know that this situation is dire, and I don't feel like it's fair. So I feel like it's, even if it makes me look bad, I come out of this and maybe bring this stuff to light again. It is what it is, try to do the right thing by him, but it obviously was his doom. And what I said was, I felt like what I said was so minimal that it would just be discarded. But it wasn't. It came to the point where they played that game, which put me in court before I got out of prison. And at that moment, a weakness, I broke the code.
I just want to say one thing about Ed Palumbo. I forgive him. I get it. I understand what they did to him, and they do it all across the country. It ain't just in McLean County. They do it everywhere. They used the fact that he was getting ready to, he just done a long stretch in prison. He was due to get out, and, they showed up and, put the squeeze on him, and he wanted to be free. I get it. I understand, and am I angry? Yes, I'm angry. Of course I'm angry, but do I forgive him? Yes, I forgive him, because, he fell victim to the same thing that they did to a bunch of people. It wasn't just Ed that they put that same squeeze on. They did it to a bunch of people. So, I forgive Ed, and I'll be honest, I think it took him it took a lot of courage for him to come clean. And when Bob Ruff interviewed him, he came clean and admitted what he did. So, I hope that more people that see what he did will get some courage, It's never too late to do the right thing, as long as the person that you wronged is still around. You can always fix it. And if I had to point the finger at anybody, to put the blame at the feet of anyone, it's at the prosecutor's feet. It's at the feet of, a couple of, Bloomington Police Department detectives. That's who I put the majority of the blame on them. They did this. Ed did what he did, but they put him up to it. And, in my book, they're a million times worse than Ed or anyone else. None of these people could have done any of this without the consent of the prosecutor's office, Tina Griffin and Charles Reinert. No one. It had to be with their consent and their blessing. They knew what was going on, and they've known what went on all these years. They weren't looking for justice for Bill Little. Charles Reinert wanted to be a judge, and they used this case to move their careers forward, and that's all it was.
What gets me is they drug him out of prison. It was like, whoop, you're getting out, so here we go. We're going to drag your ass out of prison.
Well, and that memo kind of cooperates what he was saying, because in that memo they're talking about Ed Palumbo, and they say he lately been telling to go fly a kite.
And that's what he was. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He said that. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And that's when they took him out. That's when they took all his property. They took him off of work detail. They took him to Logan, didn't give him any of his shit, put him in seg, and said, okay, you going to testify now? Because we can stack charges against you. In his mind, he was looking at, oh my God, it's not just 5 years. Because they're like, we can charge you for this for 5 years, and we can charge you for this for 5 years. I mean, what is he supposed to do? And he knows they'll do it because they fucked him in the first place.
Tam, what was Ed Palumbo in jail for at the time of his interview with the Bloomington Police Department? Why was he under so much pressure? And what happened in that case?
Well, he actually had a lengthy record already, and he was eligible for extended sentence. He was implicated in the bus station robbery and had initially confessed, complete confession to driving the getaway car. But Ed's attorney got that confession for the bus station robbery thrown out and got his charges dropped. But he was frantically accusing Jamie of several other robberies in town and the Clark Station murder robbery. Of course, he didn't give the details that he gave in testimony, which is, the big question. A lot of these change. People say one thing in 1991, and then they say something completely different in 1999 when they testified. And there were a lot of details that were included later on. He did go to jail for residential burglary, and he received 19 years in prison for that. The cops were furious. It could have been they felt like he got away with the bus station robbery. We don't know. But they locked him up and threw away the key. So when Jamie went to trial a week before Ed's release, after he had done about 10 years and his time was up for parole, that's when they dragged him into court and pressured him into telling these stories on the stand.
So what exactly did they do to Palumbo in 2000 to get him to testify against Jamie?
Well, a month before his release, they showed up. They took him out of the prison that he was in, and he was finishing his time, and he was in a work program, which was great. He was happy at the end of that very long stint. They took all of his property and threw him into seg until Jamie's trial. And they told him that if he didn't testify, that he would not get his parole at 10 years. And they would tack on a perjury charge and give him 5 more years. So he does this long stint for residential burglary. And they come up to him, they take everything away right before he's about to get out. And they say, well, if you don't do this, we're going to give you 5 more years. Instead of the 19 years, they would tack on a perjury charge and give him even more time. So another 5. So he was thinking that, he was never going to get out, that he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And that's a lot of pressure.
There seemed to be a cozy relationship between Barkus, his wife, and Palumbo and his wife. What was that all about?
I'm not really sure what this friendly foursome was about. Obviously, they were all friends. Shannon testified that on the night of the crime, she and Ed were having Easter dinner with Julie Barkus and Rick Barkus, and that's when Rick got a call about the Clark Station homicide, and they all went down there. Barkus's wife also had arranged for Palumbo to turn himself in, so they were definitely friends. Jamie's attorney tried to bring this relationship out when Shannon testified, but the judge wouldn't allow it. He said that it was a long tirade, but basically he said anyone who has some kind of relationship with anybody else involved in the state's case, he was asking whether they could come out and whether that was true or not. Could he ask, does Shannon know Katz or some other witness know Katz? And if you said, yes, I do, then are you good friends? And then you'd have to call some third witness to say, I saw Katz and that witness together, so they must be lying. So he was saying that it could go on and on and on. The irony of this, in my mind, when I was reading this testimony, is that Ed Palumbo was the one that was the reason that Jamie's attorney got kicked off of the case, because she had represented him in a completely different matter 10 years before. So, and actually the bus station. She had represented him in the bus station. She's the one that got the confession thrown out. We've talked about Ray before, who has been working on this case for many years, and he's a former chief of police. He's retired. He always says that they had a policy in their department that you couldn't be friends with informants. They had a strict policy. You're not going out to dinner with them. You're not going out for beers. You're not hanging out at their house. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was a really interesting observation by Ray.
Leslie, let's go over Palumbo's statements. What were the discrepancies with Palumbo's statements?
When Palumbo was sitting in jail for the armed bus robbery, he confessed that he was driving the car and said he had information Jamie did a similar robbery. 1 month later, he was interviewed again while still in jail, and this time he threw in that conversation about the newspaper he had with Jamie through the car window. By this time, he had only said he told his girlfriend about that conversation. He never said she was in the car. During the interview, he also piled on and accused Jamie of 5 other robberies, having stolen guns in his home and a hole in the wall, and the Clark murder. He actually called the detective back in to see him on his day off 2 days later, back into the jail, and said he just wanted to make sure he understood what he said about Jamie. He only that time accused Jamie of 2 robberies, and he didn't even mention the Clark Station murder robbery at all. 2.5 years later, another officer reviews the case file and decides that Palumbo and his girlfriend are lying. It all has to do with him trying to get off for his own bus station robbery charges, and the lead is not credible. However, when the original detective retires and the detectives who were working on Palumbo get back into power, they pull Palumbo into the grand jury to indict Jamie 8 years after the crime and 5 years after he was already cleared. This time, Palumbo says that his girlfriend was actually in the car with him when Jamie was talking about the newspaper and a gun going off, kid dies. He also adds in that Jamie told him later he got rid of the gun. He had extra details too, like he remembered Jamie's face while he was talking about it again. He says he was so serious, he just knew too much. And interestingly, he says that Jamie was someone with a smart mouth who always slipped by. And that's exactly what the officer who cleared Jamie said. He said that Palumbo was probably jealous Jamie got off for a similar crime while he was caught for his. So he thought, why not toss him in jail for the murder and all these other crimes? Well, the resentment in Palumbo's testimony is clear there. And he also added that Jamie said the composite didn't look like him, that Jamie's motive was that Bill had a smart mouth during the holdup. He had the nerve to say that this death was all the final result of Jamie living a life like that. I mean, I don't understand how he got all these extra details added in about Jamie's personality and things he resented about him. He kind of put a narrative to it all, and it was weird, and it makes me wonder who coached him or if he was just really bitter still.
What's interesting to me also, and what's important, is Shannon's tape that we got from FOIA that we had not heard before. She still says, they asked her directly, was she in the car? She said, no, I was not in the car. I was not in the car with Palumbo when allegedly passed Jamie on Olive Street. So they had to have Shannon to corroborate Ed Palumbo's story.
Leslie, what happened with Palumbo at Jamie's trial?
Well, he pretty much gave the same story he gave to the grand jury, the talk about the confession through the car window that his girlfriend heard, the motive being that the victim had a smart mouth and that the composite did not look like Jamie. But here, contrary to his girlfriend's 1991 statement, he says he doesn't remember calling the police to report Jamie. But we know through his girlfriend that he told Detective Barkus over the phone. This statement was not brought out into court to impeach his testimony, and it was just missed. Jamie's defense attorney kept at him, though, and got Palumbo to admit that he had a conversation with an investigator recently where he admitted he didn't think that Jamie committed the crime. But it stops there. He got him to relent that, yeah, he said that to the investigator, but not to say he still believes that Jamie didn't do it right there on the stand. Pitzel also must have had an idea about how Detective Barkus was angry with him and pressuring him in the interrogation room, because he asks him about his angry reaction when Palumbo supposedly said he would comply as long as in custody, but not when he got out. In response, Palumbo pulls the same stunt he did before, and he verifies that, yeah, they did have that conversation, but it just doesn't matter whose Detective Bark is. He has nothing to do with anything, and he's insignificant. And the lawyer stops asking about it. Later on redirect by the prosecutor, Renard asks Palumbo if he was promised anything by prosecutors in return for his testimony. And that's interesting because he doesn't say investigators or BPD at all. He just says myself or Tina Griffin. And of course Palumbo agrees with him. And Pitzel doesn't follow up on this and ask if anybody else made any promises or threats to him. Pitzel tried to ask Palumbo about his armed robbery case next, but it was objected to. And all that was said was by Palumbo saying, I don't remember if those charges were dismissed. But yes, they were. After he confessed, after he implicated Jamie in 6 crimes, he then got off the hook himself. And most shockingly, after this exchange, the jury is being dismissed and giving their instructions for the day not to discuss the case or review media about the case. And Palumbo, from the witness box sitting in there, addresses them out in open court and says, or don't smoke crack because we all know crack kills. And no one said anything in response. I mean, what the hell? How did that not taint the jury? Was he saying that drugs were involved in this murder robbery? I don't understand why he was being so belligerent at that moment if he was so scared and he just wanted to go home. And that's really it. That's the last the jury heard from Palumbo.
So in summary, what has Palumbo recanted to since all of this?
Palumbo has submitted affidavits and done recorded interviews. He's recanted everything. He said that Jamie is right. They had the newspaper conversation in the car, and it was a misunderstanding about if Jamie was going to read about him in the paper. He says Jamie never said he killed Bill Little to him during that conversation. He admitted that he was gifted visits with his girlfriend for his compliance, and that he was threatened with segregation and an extended prison sentence for perjury. However, what is missing is that he did not admit to making up the list of crimes in his statement to get out of the bus robbery, and he did not discuss how he changed his story to say his girlfriend was in the car during that supposed confession. He just says he thought it was all hearsay, it wouldn't go anywhere, and he was surprised Jamie's lawyer didn't bring up the fact that he was due for release 1 week after he gave his testimony.
I think he forgot, about the whole car conversation. I've talked to so many of these people, and they don't remember what they said. It just seems to me like it was fed. Obviously things were fed.
So Jamie remembers that conversation, though. We just heard him say that he remembers it. So do you think they really did have that conversation?
I think they did have the conversation. Tammy corroborated that conversation. Basically, they said they were passing each other on Olive Street, and all of these robberies were going on. And Tammy said they passed them, and Jamie just stopped real quick and said, "Hey, I read about you in the paper." And he just got this look on his face and sped away. Like, that was the extent of it. Now, Jamie says they never went to Funk's Grove. He doesn't even know what that's all about. Hiding the gun and why did you say this in front of my girlfriend? And, that was a whole other story.
Yeah, and Jamie also says that Palumbo was never at his house. So that whole story about Jamie having 2 stolen revolvers and pulling them out of a hole in the wall in his trailer, that was just completely fabricated. Palumbo was never at his house.
The thing that got me was he tried to blame Jamie for a crime that he had just confessed to.
Exactly. There were 6 of them. He threw him under the bus for 5 different crimes, 5 different burglaries and robberies, and then also was like, oh yeah, and the murder.
So what that tells me is that they were after Jamie. That he was doing everything he could to give them what they wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Because if when you read that police report, he doesn't mention anybody else. It seems like he had the direction to go in, and he knew that he was supposed to be talking about Jamie Snow. And how does it go from 0 to 6 crimes, just in 1 month?
Yeah. And he was scared. He knew that they were pissed, and he knew that he was eligible for an extended sentence. And you know what? He was right, because they locked him up. And then when that memo went out in 93, one of the responses to was, we tried to talk to Ed, and he ain't going to have anything to do with it. He's in there doing his time, and that's it. He don't want to have anything to do with it. And the girlfriend, Shannon, is just parroting whatever he says. So he was that person of authority with the police, was saying that there was no credibility with Ed Palumbo or Shannon. And he was right.
Yeah, he was. Ed Palumbo had told them to go fly a kite. He wasn't going to talk to them.
Right.
And he had also previously told Detective Barkis he was going to cooperate as long as he was in custody, but as soon as he got out, he would never say a harmful thing against Jamie Snow. So, that's what sped all this up and made it so intense, and to, throw him in SAG and get him to cooperate before that 1 week was up and he was back home.
But you know what? Why wasn't any of this used? Why wasn't any of this used to defend Jamie? I mean, that's the big picture here. All these changing stories. His attorney should have put that police report in his face and made him read it on the stand. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, and why, I don't understand why he couldn't say, you're going to go home in 1 week. It does make me wonder, though, if the judge was in on it, because he did try to get Ed to talk about his case. They just kept objecting to it. So maybe the judge wouldn't let any of that in, and there was no way to lead into that.
Same way that he wouldn't let the cozy relationship in between the four of them in. That's a very lame reason. It's not the same. It's not the same if she knows cats or of cats, and that she's palling around with the Barkises and having Easter dinner with them.
Yeah, I mean, it just really seems like maybe the fix was in, like Jamie likes to say. And I did notice something that we talked about in the last episode that I thought was kind of funny. Jamie's defense attorney did ask Ed Palumbo on the stand about something he said during Susan Claycomb's trial, and nobody objected, and it got in. So he said, "Oh, did you say this to Susan's defense attorney?" And Ed Palumbo says, "Yes, I did say that." And it goes off without a hitch, and they talk about it. But when we're trying to ask a police officer what he said at that same trial, or to the grand jury, that gets thrown out. When they wanted to ask Detective Crow about what he had previously testified to about Jamie and about the lineup and about if other people had refused to go in, all of a sudden big objection and judges on their side, and nobody ever gets to hear about it because the transcript wasn't there. But when Ed Palumbo's on the stand, yeah, they get to briefly talk about it. It's fine then.
Ridiculous. It makes me so mad. It's just infuriating. It's such a hard case to cover because it's so wrong on every level.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, if every single thing you look at with the case, nothing went right. There's not one thing that you could say, well, they had that right. At least I haven't found anything that I felt that way about.
No, and every time we do an episode, every witness, there's just tons and tons of discrepancies. There's never one that went right, like you said.
And that is unusual. A lot of cases that are wrongful conviction, there are things that you can say the police did well or the judge got that right. In this case, there's nothing. Everything was fucked up.
How many does it take? That's my question. How many does it take? When you know that somebody put somebody on the stand, one person,
right,
knowingly perjured witness, doesn't that taint the whole thing?
See, that's what I always thought, but even Paul said it last week. He said, you put up 12, and if 10 of them are bullshit, but you get 2 of them that told the truth, now you have 2. That's good enough. It's like, wait a minute, you put up 10 that lied. Shouldn't that just blow your whole case up?
I say 1. Because, as we get into it, we'll see that we have concrete proof.
If you're willing to use any of them at all, that means that your case sucks.
Yes.
But for some reason, we see this shit happen, so apparently our opinions are not concrete.
In this episode, we show just how easy it can be to get someone who is simply desperate to make up a murder confession. Ed Palumbo blamed Jamie for a crime he had just confessed to. Piled on Jamie, saying he supposedly confessed to murder, and then had his girlfriend, Shannon Schmidt, vouch for him. He was let go, but roped back in 8 years later while in prison for another crime. He was thrown into seg and threatened with more time, so he caved. Said he didn't think his hearsay story should matter, but it put Jamie away for life. If you have any information that may help Jamie, please call the tip line at 888-710-SNOW. There is a $10,000 reward for any information leading to a new trial or the exoneration of Jamie Snow. Palumbo wasn't the only one who made up a story against Jamie to get out of stag and prison time. The same threats were applied to another person, and a second confession was born. How did they get away with it? That's next time on Snow Files.